Amazing. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in for our first of these podcast sessions. I'm Anija,
I'm Lucy.
and we are joined by the wonderful Vanessa Sturman, who is a nutrition and health coach, a multi-award winning speaker, an expert in performance, nutrition, and behavior change. And she has been featured across platforms like Sky News, BBC Radio, and many more. And we have the privilege of hearing from her ourselves today. So, Vanessa, a huge thank you for joining us today and for bringing your expertise to our London Marathon runners.
Thank you. Brilliant to be here today and amazing that people are doing this London Marathon.
Yeah, we have 26 runners doing the challenge in just under 2 months now. And I'm sure they have a ton of questions about training, about nutrition. And yeah, we're really excited to pick your brain on those topics. Um, let's get started. So, the first of the questions that we have for you is, can you tell us a bit about your journey into nutrition and what led you to become a health coach and speaker?
Yes, definitely. I think like a lot of people, it starts with a personal story. So about 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago now, I was a teenager and I started being very restrictive with my eating. What actually to do with running? I started off just being quite healthy, going for very short runs, saying to my dad, let's run to the end of the path together. And that turned into doing things like running 7 miles a day, eating very little, becoming obsessed with body weight and being very, very unhappy. And then I actually turned to binge eating and bulimia, and I was in a terrible, terrible place. I was very sick, and it's horrific if anyone is in that position. And I decided one day to get better. I decided, well, I can't live like this. This is horrible. And I asked myself a series of questions. I said, well, how can I eat lovely food, be nice and full, not worry about dieting, but actually be very healthy? And then a very important question I asked myself, extremely profound, was how can I eat cake and still stay healthy and enjoy life? And so I went and learned about evidence-based nutrition. I studied social and biological anthropology at Cambridge University. I went on to become a behavior change and workplace change expert in the corporate world. And at the same time, was always so into food in my personal life. I even started a recipe website. Also got very into sustainability and the effect that food had on our planet and realized there were so many shifts people could make. And then years ago, I realized so many people are struggling with the practicalities of just building healthy eating into their lives. People are doing a lot of restriction, even if they don't seem like they're struggling at all. And I thought, I really want to help people make this simple. I want to help businesses perform better as well, and therefore also help their people. And I want to help the planetary health. So all of those things together, really.
Amazing. I love what you said about, wanting to still eat cake and find a way to add that into your lifestyle. Because I think one of the common things that our marathon runners go through is when they sign up immediately, they're like, well, I need to change my whole diet. I need to stop eating sugary foods and survive on gels and chews and salads. So, yeah, I guess the follow-up to that would be, what would you say are some common misconceptions or red flags that people may fall into when they're on this journey with the London Marathon and their nutrition?
Yeah. So I think when doing something like a marathon, very similar to when people go on a health kick or they say, whether it's January and I want to go on a diet, people can become quite scared of food, quite restrictive. They might think exactly that. I have to cut out anything that's crisps, chocolate, cake, anything. And actually, it's more about what we put in. I'm much more interested about what you add into your diet. For example, adding a handful of nuts and seeds a day can help with things like our cognitive performance. It can help reduce the risk of disease. That's just adding something very, very simple. It doesn't have to be super complex. And I'm more worried about what's on the majority of your plate than if you sometimes have dessert. If we start getting very restrictive, we're probably going to go into something called a binge restrict cycle. And we see this in the sports world as well. While I'm training, I'm going to be ultra restrictive, can't even look at a cake. And then when they come out of that, they just head for all the unhealthy food. And actually, if having a little bit of cake stops you doing that binge restrict cycle, then it's a healthy choice.
Mm.
So that's something that's very important. When you hear people talking in a very restrictive way, that's a red flag online. If you hear people only talking about their personal situation, if they say, well, I cut this out and I feel much better, That's not science. That's not evidence. We have to look at the evidence. Even when people are demonizing healthy foods, oh, don't eat fruit because of the sugar. We know from decades of research that fruit is so healthy for us, helps reduce risk of disease, helps our gut health, can help our blood pressure, etc. We need to be eating more fruit. And actually, most people are not eating enough of it. So the things we know people are not eating enough of: fruit and vegetables, only about a third of adults are getting their 5 a day. And very relevant to Youth
Mm-hmm.
UK, it's even less when it comes
Yeah.
to people under 18. And 5 a day is just the baseline. We should be aiming for as much as possible. Well, say as much as possible. Sorry, more than 5 a day would be great. Sorry, that was the wrong thing to say. As much as possible, and this can be as simple as add some blueberries onto your morning oats, add a banana onto your peanut butter and toast. It doesn't have to be really complex. Put an apple in your bag. Now, some other
Yeah.
signs of misinformation are all the experts and doctors have got it wrong, and I've got it right, and I've got the secret. Why would all the doctors, the scientific consensus online, why
Mm.
would they all be wrong? And this random person who's, in inverted commas, done their own research be the right one? So just be very careful when you're seeing those sorts of things and you're not seeing statements backed up by science and evidence. So we can't just say, well, this food contains X, or what someone might deem a toxic ingredient, therefore it's bad. Water is toxic in high amounts. So you could call pretty much anything toxic because the dose makes the
Mm.
poison. So just listen out for some of these sorts of things, and do check things with the British Dietetic Association. So they have some things on their website that can help you recognize a few of these bits of misinformation as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's really interesting how little small changes can be made to your diet daily and, can increase your health so greatly, and how simple it can actually be. And people do tend to overthink things like this. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. So yeah, our next question is, running a marathon requires a lot of resilience. What does resilience mean to you, and how has it influenced the way you approach nutrition?
So resilience is being able to adapt in those really difficult times and still being able to, well, hopefully thrive in those times and not let them massively affect you, even though, of course, difficult times and stress are going to affect us. They can be really hard. And it's also important that we can talk about that and say, I am struggling. What I think is really important for resilience, and a big part of what I teach, is what is the baseline you have put in place? So what often happens is people try and do these massive overhauls when it comes to their health. I'm going to work out loads. I'm not going to eat anything unhealthy. I'm only going to eat salad. Please eat more than salad. We can go into some of what a balanced plate looks like, because we need much more than that. And then what happens is something comes along that's a bit stressful. Maybe they need to move house, move jobs, and suddenly they go, okay, I can't do any of that health stuff. I've got to deal with this. Now, if we have a more solid baseline, if we understand a bit more about balanced eating, if we have the habits really ingrained, such as, look, I can't go out for a run today, but I can go for a 10-minute walk because I've got that in my baseline. I've got frozen blueberries in the freezer because I stock up on those when I go to the supermarket. That's in my range of habits now, so that I can stick them on some oats with a few nuts. And if that's all I have time for breakfast, at least that's happening. So it really is about building this foundation so that even if we oscillate, we're just oscillating a small amount, because we are dealing with stressful times. I deal with stressful times and a few things have to change. But when that foundation is there, and also how great you feel when you are actually adding these sorts of foods into your diet, you've got them stocked up in your cupboard, you realize where to buy them and the easy things that you can do, that makes it much easier during those times.
Mm. Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think tied to what you were saying about building better eating habits and what a balanced diet looks like for our runners. Obviously, they're going through this intense training, especially in the 2 months in the lead up to it. We were wondering which everyday eating habits could have the greatest impact on things like performance and recovery, and what a balanced diet would look like for someone who's wanting to prepare for an intense training like that.
Yeah, so there's lots of different elements, and of course, everyone's going to have different preferences. There's no exact way you have to eat, or you have to eat exactly this many meals or eat this frequently. It's going to be different for everyone. It's got to fit with your schedule. But a few things that could be helpful. try and get balanced plates of food together. And also remember, complex carbohydrates are really, really important. Carbohydrates are really, really important, especially when you're expending energy. You know, that is what your body uses, the brain and the body. So making sure you are not scared of those. But the more we can get our plate full of complex carbohydrates, so that's things like our root vegetables, rice, you know, white rice, especially if you're going on a run, that might be really, really helpful. The brown and whole grain rice, you know, that's got more fiber and that's fantastic as well. Bringing in some really great sources of protein as well. And this is also where we've got some important parts. A lot of people start majoring on animal protein. And, you know, we can have some animal protein and be totally healthy, but a lot of people are missing some of the advantages of things like plant protein. So, you know, this would come from getting our beans in. So beans are fantastic for staying more full. They're full of fiber. Fiber feeds our good gut bacteria. That's also going to, you know, help you go to the toilet better as well. It can help bring down inflammation in the body. And only 1 in 10 people are actually getting the amount of fiber they need. Less when it comes to the youth as well. So that could be you're having even, you know, your regular stir fry. Maybe you are doing chicken or prawns in there. Just add a tin of chickpeas into there or a tin of chickpeas into the rice you're already making. That easily builds that in. And that's another habit we can have in our baseline. So we want our complex carbs. We want to have some protein on the plate as well. We want to have a lot of fruit and veg. You know, that's really important to have that on the plate as well. So that could be frozen fruit or veg. You know, that's perfectly healthy. In fact, they're often frozen at the point of picking and they don't go off in your freezer because people say, yeah, but it goes off in my fridge. And we want to have healthy fats. So fat is really important. That can be things like your handful of nuts and seeds, avocado, olives, bit of olive oil. Make sure you're putting that on the plate as well. So it's just sort of getting those 4 things, you know, into a balanced plate. Now that's really simplifying it. But if you can remember those things and just think, let me at least add 1 or 2, even if I'm not usually having the most balanced meal, that's going to help. And then things like berries, full of antioxidants, can help with things like your recovery. So building those in daily can be so helpful.
Interesting. I liked what you said about, you know, young people especially not getting enough fiber and, you know, it's something that we don't necessarily even think about when we consider a diet. We just think anything green, anything fruit and veggie is just good enough to add to the plate. I wanted to follow up with whether you think the balanced diet differs based on kind of the age range. So we have runners who are in their early 20s, we have runners in their 40s and 50s, and even more like 60s. So yeah, do you have like advice for our runners based on the different points that they are in their life and how training and nutrition might affect them differently?
Yeah, so we know as we age, we might need a little bit more protein, for example. So there might be a little bit more of a tweak on the older side. There might be a calorie difference as well. You know, we might need a little bit less as we're older, but it really depends on what you are burning as well in terms of keeping that healthy weight. So it is going to vary depending on person. So it's not always going to be a case that just because of your age, you need more or less calories. So it's very, very individual. But in terms of that overall balance, as long as you're getting some of the basics of that in, that's going to apply throughout life. And in terms of reducing your risk of disease, for example, your disease risk for things like cardiovascular disease, so heart disease, starts to build when you're younger. So you want to be looking at not having too much saturated fat. You don't just want to think about that when you're older. And what often happens is people go, oh goodness, I'm over 40 now, I'm more at risk of certain lifestyle diseases. We want to start bringing down the risk from when we're younger, building in these fiber-filled foods, the fruit, the veg, the whole grains, the nuts and seeds from that younger age to help us when we're older as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
So you emphasize enjoyment over perfection. How can runners enjoy food and fuel effectively for training and race day without feeling restricted or following unrealistic rules?
Yeah. So the 2 things I get people to focus on are adding and adapting. So you'll notice I haven't said avoiding or taking away or restricting, adding and adapting. So that's some of the things we've already talked about. Adding that banana to your, you know, could be taking a piece of toast that was just butter on toast to peanut butter or some sort of nut butter with a banana. You've just added and adapted, you know, very, very small. But done consistently, that's going to have a much better impact on your health than just the butter and toast. So adding and adapting. Right, I usually have spaghetti bolognese on my plate. I'm going to add a load of veg to the plate. It's doing these habits and this is the key, being consistent with them, that's going to bring the impact, and having that mindset as opposed to, goodness, I can't have that piece of cake, or you can tell I love cake. That's a very personal one. Whatever it is for
Don't
you,
we all?
I can't go out and have that meal that's got deep fried things in it. If you're doing that, but you're not doing it that often, you're not doing it every day, it's really not going to make a huge difference. If the majority of what you're doing, you're building in so many more of these healthy habits. So please keep that mindset of the adding and adapting, rather than I can't have anything that isn't supposedly a health food.
Interesting. I feel like I can take some of that advice into my own life as well, to be fair. Because I think staying consistent is often the tough part. And I feel like for a lot of our runners, they spend months preparing for this huge run, and afterwards, it's almost like, do I go back to how I used to kind of lead my life before in terms of nutrition? And maybe that's something that they can take forward into their everyday life as well.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, in terms of, so you said you have some running experience as well, and I think in the lead up to a big run like a marathon can be quite stressful, and you want to prepare nutritionally as well, be absolutely energy fueled. Do you have any advice on what that diet should look like, maybe the night before, the morning of, or in the recovery period as well, if you have any suggestions?
Sure. I mean, like I said, carbohydrates really, really important. We've got to have the energy to do what we need to do. And we are often told go for whole grains, go for the whole grain version of rice. Before a run, it might actually be helpful for you to have the white version. That's going to give you more of that more immediate energy. You've got to make sure it also tastes good to you. Make sure it is as balanced as possible. So building in those concepts we talked about, get those complex carbohydrates in. We might need a bit more protein after we've gone for that run. And there is nothing wrong as well with having some of the more processed foods. So this is another myth that we see online. Everything's got to be homemade. This is what makes people, again, go in and out of these health kicks, is they do everything at home and then they say, oh, I can't do that anymore. That was exhausting. And now I'm out and about. There is nothing wrong with grabbing a protein shake from Boots or something like that. There's Huel, for example. Is it 100, these 100% perfect? No, nothing is. But what it is going to give you, it's going to give you nutrients, it's going to give you a certain amount of protein, and it is easy and convenient. There is nothing wrong with grabbing that kind of thing, and it is better than having nothing. Sometimes people finish a run and they go and grab a pastry. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a celebratory pastry, but what I would suggest is that you have some other things with it. You say, right, I'm going to go grab, I don't know, some fruit. I'm going to grab one of those protein shakes. I've got a handful of nuts. I'm going to have this as a post-workout snack or whatever. And I really fancy a pastry as well. Fine, go and have your pastry. But it's about how you're bringing these different foods and habits in.
Yeah, interesting. So you're not restricting yourself just to what you think you should be doing. You find a way to bring in what you like as well, as you mentioned before.
Exactly. And it's about, you can have both. So sometimes people say, oh, but I really want that, whatever it is, the pastry or cake, or do I eat something healthy? And I just say, have both. Go and have the more balanced kind of meal or snack, and then have the thing that you want. It's it's completely fine. Doesn't have to be all or nothing approach. And that's exactly what makes people do these training regimes. And then, as you just said, go back to their normal life, when actually we're building in healthy habits that are going to help us be an athlete, as it were, in all points of our life. We need to perform at work. We want to perform in our social lives. We want fun in our lives, and we need the energy to do that.
Amazing.
Definitely.
Fantastic. I think those are all the main questions that we had. And so insightful in terms of, I think, finding ways to incorporate your diet and nutrition, not just in a marathon training process, but also in everyday life, following it as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, Vanessa. We're so grateful for your time and expertise. And I'm sure our marathon runners are looking forward to applying all of your valuable advice. So yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll conclude the session here. If you have any questions, nutrition-wise, for Vanessa, I'm sure she will kindly answer any follow-ups, which, yeah, you can send to us and we can send onwards as well. But yeah, we hope you got what you needed from this session, and there'll be more to come. So stay tuned.